what drives the cost. I think that was a key part of, you know, podcast listening and research and home method and hearing from other people, understanding where what components or the way that you make decisions or the way that you include things or the sizes of things, how that's going to impact on your project so you can make those informed decisions. Because going through that first design, you will say yes and no to things, but won't really know what that means in terms of budget.
I love the design that you've both come up with where you're at now. It's a really efficient, whenever I look at a plan and it feels clean, and by clean, I mean it feels really well ordered. I know that circulation is going to occur through it in a very rational way. The house reveals itself in terms of that compression to expansion of the California Bungalow sleeping zones through to the expansion of the rear pavilion, and then the connection with outdoors and the way that the alfresco area works. The maximization of the orientation, you're going to get good sunlight because it's, pulled back. It's a smaller footprint. So you're not having to be as impacted by the neighbor. You're not sort of squeezing it around the back. It's all actually, I look at it and go, this all happened for a reason, because what you've ended up with is,
I agree.
Is going to be a fantastic home. So, and I think too, the way that the design connects to the existing house with the threshold zone and all of that is going to enable a lot simpler construction process as well. So there's something really lovely, and it's why I teach that method of those bolt-on extensions of how you help the home tell a new story of its new reinvigorated life, and that you don't try and sort of seamlessly connect it or integrate it with the existing architecture, but that you let it be an expression of a new connection and a new kind of form. And then that frees you up, obviously, to be putting in much more standardized materials and a faster kind of construction method and all of that kind of stuff. And I can see all of that coming to play in how this extension's working with the existing home.
Thanks. And the other point that I think we're proud of is we challenged ourselves to work the existing house a lot harder. And, some of it was, like necessity is the mother of invention, I guess they say. But yeah, because we did need to reduce cost. Well, what are we changing in the existing home that we don't have to? Or just how could we do it? How could we achieve that objective in a more cost-effective way? And yeah, I think we're proud that we were able to do that. And there's one new wall and not like 5 new walls, and the demolition extends a lot less. And then that also speaks to the integrity of the existing house, and it really will then even more provide that, I guess that point of difference, and respecting the existing home and its architecture and still having that modern, pleasant experience.
Yeah. And also mitigating the risks of what might happen when you start to pull apart an existing home to then try and insert a whole heap of new construction in it. You're radically reducing that by only having minimal kind of input or change to the existing home too. So yeah, I love it. I think it's worked out so well. So, and I think I'm hoping that it's encouraging for people to hear who have perhaps reached a point. I get so many emails from homeowners who say, I'm not in home method. I've been listening to your podcast. I've been working on this design for 18 months. I've lost trust in my designer. I'm not sure if the design is working. I don't know what to do next, but we've already come this far. We've got a builder on board who can start in 6 months' time. Yes, in 3 months' time. It's going to cost us a lot more than we wanted to spend, but I feel that we should just keep going. And it is that people do fall into that trap of just feeling like I'm on this train and I've just got to keep commuting.
We almost did. Yes.
And so it does take a lot to make that call to arrest that kind of very strong momentum. And I love that how much you've turned this project around in that regard. So it's I'm hoping that others are listening to this going, oh, okay, maybe I need to get back up to helicopter view. I need to think about this. I need to test the feasibility of these ideas. Really make sure if I'm only going to do this once, that I'm actually going to end up with the house that suits us and that suits us in all of the ways, not just, in terms of what we've sort of come up with to date. So can you talk
Yeah,
about?
you're not a failure. Yeah, you're not a failure if you decide to either go in a different direction or reconsider something that you did before. I think that's a really important mentality to adopt.
Oh, I love it, Ben. Can you talk about your budget through all of this, how you've navigated your budget and your thoughts on your projects, Ben? Because obviously, if you have been doing this for a while, I imagine that your budget's potentially had to move a little bit. Like, what's that sort of process involved?
It has been. So, yeah, there were almost like three different budget phases. I'd say there was that, highly optimistic when we were purchasing this home, what might we be able to um, achieve with a certain amount of funds. And that was in 2021, really, before the true extent of building cost rises was known. And then as we really continued through like listening to the podcast actually, and being part of Home Method, acknowledging that we might be underestimating our budget a bit, like that actually helped us set our expectations a bit higher. But we were still, in a way, because we weren't talking to builders, we were flying blind a little bit. And then um, being being fortunate to, making a gain in our last house and say like, all right, we're going to put this into this one. We did decide to, we set different tiers of budget, right? Like we knew that what we set a certain amount for what it's going to cost to build, but then also fit out, because the last thing that we wanted was, a big empty house with no furniture in it. Or no landscaping. Like that was because the outdoors were important, and the connection and visualizing and seeing the outdoors from inside, that landscape was going to be important, and then set those tiers of budget. However, we still got the quotes back at the end of last year that were far and above where we needed to be. And then it was a question again. It's that question: do you find even more money, or do you really start thinking hard? And I mean, sometimes also the easiest and easy thing to do can be, it's like you ask yourself, like, what if you just didn't do it? Like, what if you just walk away? And it's like, you know, maybe, but we're also at this stage for a reason. And um, part of part of enjoyment of life is, it depends on the person. Like, part of enjoyment of life is, travel and spending time with people, and also like enjoying, how much time do you spend at home? Like a lot. And as I get older, I spend more time at home, and having that really pleasant experience, that is actually a priority. So we are going to spend an amount of money, go forward with a project, but just make it as smart as possible. But then also, that caused us to, I think, recommit to a budget even more, knowing that we weren't willing to go up again. Then having a conversation with the two builders that we're trying to decide between, that this is our budget. Like, this isn't our budget. We're holding something back. Like, this is how much we're willing to spend, and it has to fit within here. Otherwise, we're not doing it. And that, I mean, I think that helped, builders, it helped the designer in a way. But also just like really helped us that, oh, why not just add this little thing? Like, enough of that. Like, that's gone. We're going to make these really good decisions, and we're not going to spend the least that we could, but we're not going to spend the most. And it's really, I think, about optimizing the budget that you're willing to spend.
Oh, Ben, music to my ears, mate. That's there because it is. I think this is the challenge: is that people look at their budgets as a ceiling, rather than understanding that it's the investment that paves the road to not only the home, but then the life that you get to lead in it, and it's got to support what you're delivering, but then also your ability to do other things in your life. And so that rational observation, as having a conversation with one of our other members, Sophie, who's done the California Bungalow renovation in Perth, and she finished last year. And she started identifying how many extra, she's a medical specialist, and so how many extra shifts would she have to do to pay for the thing? And for her, it was a really great metric for her to assess, was it of value to her? And for you to identify that this is actually about, we've got this amount, we've got this bucket of money. What is the biggest impact that we can make with this bucket of money, so that we can start making really strong value-based decisions that align with our goals, align with the life that we want to lead, and not just what we want to have in our home, but then what we want to be able to do with the life that we're living in this home and beyond this home. So it's yeah, and I know that there was some uncomfortable adjustments on that budget during that time when you did get those reality checks, which can be really confronting. Some people get really frustrated by that. Your ability to just be presented with the information, treat it as data, and then figure out what you needed to do was always really admirable, because it's important, I think, I've loved how there's been the immediate kind of, I think, response that has an emotional level to it, because it's your home and it's personal and it's your finances and all that kind of stuff. But what you've been able to do, even just, I've noticed when you've asked a question in the group that's been quite there's been an element of a lack of certainty or a concern about how things, and then you get that piece of advice, you get that piece of feedback, you're very quickly able to turn it around and start then taking the next step. And so it's been really great to see that. And I think your mindset about all of this has really supported you, but to be able to do those, to take those actions in your project. So it's definitely commendable. So we've talked a little bit, I suppose, about how that process of the redesign happened and how it reordered things for you, and also that it's ended up being a good outcome. I'm wondering if we can just talk a little bit about, if you're going to give some more advice to people who might be in the same position as you, where they're looking at a design that's kind of got away from them, they can't afford to build it, they are trying to figure out, can they find more money to do it? What did that whole kind of assessment of what was available to you in all the choices that you needed to make next to figure out if this project was going to happen or not help you do in terms of getting clarity about where you were going to go next?
I'd say the most important thing in undertaking that evaluation was feeling sufficiently educated to make that decision. And how can I, and it goes back to that word optimizing, how can I get the most for the least, really, within reason. And most isn't, just about sort of like quantity. It is about quality and quality of experience, quality of materials, etc. How can we get the most for the least, and what drives the cost? I think that was a key part of podcast listening and research and home method and hearing from other people, understanding what components or the way that you make decisions or the way that you include things or the sizes of things, how that's going to impact on your project, so you can make those informed decisions. Because going through that first design, you will say yes and no to things, but won't really know what that means in terms of budget. So understanding some of the biggest drivers really helped us evaluate. We could better then sit there and evaluate what we wanted to include and not.
I remember there being a point where you were, I suppose, having a bit of push and pull with your designer and really trying to work out, okay, how far do we kind of keep trying to push it in this relationship? Do we need to look at developing another relationship? Do we just, how did you find finding your voice in that process and figuring out how you were actually going to navigate making this happen and making some of those harder decisions about shifting the direction of the project overall?
There was a point where we found ourselves, I'd probably say, frustrated, because we felt that we weren't communicating, that the communication between us and the designer isn't where we wanted it to be or where it hadn't been originally. And almost, just a bit of frustration in terms of not knowing how to navigate that. Because, is it something that you work through? Is there some other way? have we been going down the right road? And asking yourself, like, what do you actually do about this? But reflecting on that time, it really just became so emotional for us because, whether you felt like I don't know, whether you felt like you weren't being listened to or whether you weren't communicating properly or you set expectations the wrong way, it becomes this big, just emotional zone where it's hard to think straight. And what helped us through, I think, is thinking through that feedback from whether it was other group members or other people about really trying to clarify um, what you wanted, but being able to have a professional conversation with a with a professional and about what you wanted to do and the way that you wanted to move forward, and having those tools and like almost like a hand up out of that, like out of your current mindset to be able to at least rise above some of those feelings for a period of time to be able to then start on a different path, whatever that path might be. And I was really, even though I might have been skeptical about how we were going to be able to navigate it, to the designers' credit, like they met us where we took the conversation to. And we were able to then plan a trajectory for moving forward with the project that has been beneficial, and they've been, very, helpful and responsive. It is a different relationship and a different sort of engagement than we did last time, but kind of knowing, each party knowing the other one, yeah, to be able to do that. So I see people who, yeah, you might, the relationship that you're in might not be the right one. I guess this goes for a lot of things, right? But your relationships are work, right? So you have to tend to it, and if sometimes things kind of go off track, finding the right way to at least, they might not succeed in the end, but at least give it a chance to yeah, be on the right track, and maybe the relationship will look a little bit different, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Ben. It was really amazing to observe that. And also, I love that you touched on how you can feel really emotional in those moments. And so, having the tools and the ability to pull yourself out of that so that you can try and make more informed, objective decisions. It's one of the biggest challenges, I think, when you're doing your own project. I know as an architect, I can always do it for clients like that. When it's our own projects, it's always much more challenging. It always feels so much more momentous. And so I love that you shared your experience with that, because I know that's going to be super helpful for people listening. Now, your builder selection process, you mentioned that you didn't do the pack process. But you've been obviously in conversations with various builders at different times, looking at how this project is priced, how it's going to be constructed, and getting input in different models. Can you talk through some of that builder selection process and what that's been like through your design phase, particularly in the iterations of the project?
Sure. I think we started communicating with builders initially, in the lead up to that, that first design formal tender process where, trying to, find personal recommendations and recommendations for the designer, trying to, the designers encourage us to go, both inside and outside, for advice, and using the, interview questions in the program were very helpful, and also engaging how questions were reacted to. And then actually even going through that tender process and the negotiation afterwards, that ended up being a huge part of the builder relationship, and understanding, how, not just like how each person was navigating kind of like the questions and the discussions, but it reveals, what someone's approach is, their level of expertise, the way they engage, their level of responsiveness. And because we're now an entire year later, we have actually quite a lengthy relationship with two of the potential builders. So that says a lot too. And to both of their credit, uh, people that we'd really like to work with. And now, having gone through this redesign process and taking that, finally taking the advice to engage, not just engage a builder throughout this process, but use that, like the magic of the the multi-professional input at the same time. Like, now I get it. How you have, it's the designer and the engineer and the energy and the builder, like they play off each other. They all have, different ideas. There's all the what ifs, like maybe if we did it that way. Did you think about this? Like, that's my favorite. And it's so much more than the sum of its parts. And not only do you get the good advice, but I think probably that feeds into the confidence. I mean, I don't want to be overconfident at all, but that does feed into, I think, a homeowner's level of confidence that you aren't carrying something through one to the next. And I think something you said the other week, like, if you're just going sequentially, you really do have to bring almost like everything and all the rationale from one person to the next. And that is so true. And that's how we felt the first time. It's almost, going through this the second time is almost like, we it's being able to do a whole nother renovation without having spent the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and learning the lessons that way. Like, we learn the lessons. Yeah, it costs a bit of money, but it costs, ultimately less than, I guess, doing something that wouldn't have worked out that well for us. So having that engagement now, at the very pointy end, being able to feed builder input back to the engineers and then back to the designers, and it flowing back out the other way is, really something great to see. And it just makes, I think it's going to make for a better home, and greater satisfaction.
Yeah, I'm interested to see when you get down to the pointy end how you're going to make a choice between the two that you've been in long conversation with. So,
It's like, can we build two? No,
can you both
can't
build
build two
it?
houses. That's the problem.
Want to work together? We like both of you.
It's going to be hard. Yeah, to both of their credit, they're terrific professionals and really great people.
Yeah, and it's that multidisciplinary approach during the design phase really does elevate when those professionals are behaving the way that they should, and they're providing the input that they can and collaborating effectively. It really does make a significant difference to that, the best being adopted as you navigate, and that optimization that you've been seeking, that really does come through that multidisciplinary approach. So now this project's obviously taken longer than you anticipated. You touched on the fact, earlier, that you just think about it being 12 months, not 3 years, and you just kind of, jump in. How have you been feeling about it? Like, how, in terms of it taking a little bit longer, and what's that been like for you as you've navigated it together?
That's probably also been in a few phases. There have been the most the most difficult stages is when either you feel like you're in analysis paralysis, or I'm starting with the negative, but have failed, because things aren't on track the way that you thought they were going to be. Um, we went we originally went through this design with, really wanting to tie down as many details as possible, and really understood that that would probably take a bit longer. And the designers were very accommodating of that. Answered a lot of questions, undertook a lot of revisions, and the time just started extending beyond what we thought it was originally. And then, as much as it is okay, I think, to take more time, having, like, giving yourself unlimited time can be a little bit demotivating, and you need to set a goal for yourself, and decisions do need to be made. And sometimes the easiest thing is to not make a decision. So how do make a decision, besides, like, using your brief, but how do you use communication, with your team, with your partner, whoever you're making a decision with on this project, about how you're going to go ahead. And then being being okay when things don't feel great, and it's feeling, off track, or why did I do this? like, again, that's going to be an emotional, it's going to be an emotional dip, but you will get past it. Like, you've been all the way through here. There's a way. So many people have done this before. Like, people with less knowledge, people with less capability. You got to tell yourself that you're able to do this, and then just strike that balance between being able to make decisions, not going back. Mike is captain of shutting down what ifs. There's no what ifs allowed in this house. So don't do that. Don't do it. And don't compare yourself against other people. Um, and knowing that there isn't, it's not going to be all one thing or the other, and you will have to balance a range of emotions and sometimes push yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Mike is captain of shutting down what ifs. So that's so my husband is anytime I begin the sentence with I wonder, I just get an eye roll. So it's very similar. Thank you for sharing that, because I know that that's going to also be super helpful for people. I think you've got a lovely mindfulness about how you're navigating this project, and a lovely self-awareness that I know is paying dividends for you in how you're showing up in your project. We talk a lot about how you show up in your project is how you show up in your life, and vice versa.
True.
And that thing about making no decision, it's still making, like, when you make no decision, that's still a decision. So it's I think that having that kindness with yourself is super important as well. So now, just before we wrap up, I'd love to know, because you have dived into home method into the community. We've had a couple of one-to-one Zooms sessions as well to look over your design and have general conversations about things. You've really embraced the resources and the learning, and I think done an incredible job with how you've approached your self-education through this process. So I'm curious if you can tell us how you feel that's actually supported your journey in your project, and I suppose what's been helpful for you in that regard, having access to that community and the Q&As and all of those kinds of things.
There's actually been two ways. I mean, I'd say both on a technical level and an emotional level. What we were just talking about, being able to have that, self reflection or perspective about projects. A lot of that is really built on understanding other people's experiences. That you're not. It's not that you're just not alone, but like, there are people who are going through the exact same things. Even even if you're a beginner in your project, there's still people who are at earlier stages than you, and you're like, I got through that, and this next thing that seems impossible, I'm going to get through that too, because that builds your self confidence. But then, people who are even further along in their projects, being able to reflect their experiences, provide advice, and whether it's the same the way you would see something or not. Sometimes it is the same way you see something, and you can, learn that way or proceed that way. But sometimes people have a different perspective and navigate something else, and that also tells you something, because there's different ways to go about something. It's okay to do things your way if you want to, and it's okay to do things another way if somebody else does. So having that reflection, and then also there's people with so much technical knowledge who are gracious in terms of sharing, answering questions, providing, unsolicited feedback is incredible gratitude. And then probably to almost like wrap it all up, is that just that, we all, in a way seek, community and belonging, just to have another group of people that just feels good and helps you get through something that is actually, we've all signed up for this, and it's pretty challenging. So it's to have that helpfulness is, I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have you found that you've used the checklists and the templates very much as you've navigated your
Yes,
project?
the room notes are like, that's amazing. Kind of like the interview things, the best, like, having being able to go through everything and learn the steps, A to Z, front to back to front is great. But then having things to refer back to, even though it's maybe the fourth time you've gone to a resource, it's like, now you're like, now I understand this. So like, now I need it even more. So it's actually layers of helpfulness throughout what for many people is a very lengthy endeavor.
Thank you for talking about that, because I think it's really helpful for people to see. I find that everybody uses home method differently, and so I love hearing how you've tapped into the resources. And obviously, some members are quite quiet in their use. We know that they're a member. We don't see them in the Facebook talking in the Facebook community, but we know they're there, and they're often um, visiting the Q&As and those kinds of things, and we see their usership. And then there's other community members like yourself, and we've got some other amazing members that are very sharing a lot of the progress of their project, and really connecting with each other. And so that myriad of experience that people have inside that community and inside that program is always fascinating to me, to see how it gets used differently by everyone. So before we wrap up, is there anything else that you wanted to share?
I'd probably two things. Number one, um, you can do it. It is challenging, but it's worth it. And the other thing is, I think I got this from another home method member, but giving yourself permission to have something nice. Like it is, like, do you need some of these things? No. But do you want some of these things? Yes. And we all have sort of like different priorities, like different levels of, you know, different preferences, and giving yourself that permission, I think, is it's really a wonderful thing.
That's awesome, Ben. I'm looking forward to checking in with you again as you keep moving and making progress on your project. I feel, we're obviously recording this at the beginning of November. You mentioned to me before we jumped on that you're trying to get a bunch of stuff done before Christmas, and obviously all of the shutdowns, so that you can set yourself up well for 2025 and construction. And so I'm really excited to see what next year holds for you both as you make this project a reality. Can't wait to have a front row seat to it, and hopefully get you back on the podcast to have a bit of an update about where you're at. So thanks so much for your time, Ben. It's been really great to chat with you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for all your help throughout our project journey.
Oh, that's my pleasure. It's been awesome.